I think I lost our napkins.
There we are. Okay, it started. You'll see that there was like 9 people
Out of my pocket.
waiting.
Get things started. Hopefully you can see us.
There we are.
All wanting to backseat truck.
Lucy, can you see us?
Is she here?
Cool.
I think she was, I'm moving it up.
She did? Lucy.
Yes.
Oh, it's like.
Your legs have gone.
All right.
Hi.
Bye. Okay.
Am I the only one on besides?
Yeah, he hasn't admitted anyone else.
I haven't admitted anyone
Okay.
else yet. So I want to make you a co-host.
Okay.
Is that the deal? This is the world's fastest mouse. Okay, you are a co-host.
Okay.
Okay. So is you're not Alex, are you?
No.
Is Alex in person or is he virtual, Lucy?
I'm sorry.
Alex arriving in person or is he virtual?
Sorry, it's Andrew and he is virtual.
He's waiting to
So
come
he's
in.
already here. Andrew's here.
He's waiting to come in, I think.
Okay.
Oh, is he? Okay. All right.
Yeah, everybody's coming in now.
Am I doing? Oh, sorry, Andrew. You're right. It is Andrew. Andrew Coté. Fantastic. All right. Who's doing the introduction? It's your name.
Okay, we all set?
So-
I am. I'll do it all. Hello. Welcome to our October meeting. I'm sorry, it's really been a bit of a shit show. It is what it is. I am sick, so I've got the plague. I don't know if I have COVID or not, but should not be seen out in public. And Michelle was indisposed also. And so Henry, we really appreciate you and Damien coming and setting this up in person for us to let this happen. We've got everybody here. We are going to start our meeting with our beekeeping calendar, and Marion, please, Marion, go ahead, please.
Thanks, Lucy. I'm just going to share my screen and then you have to, sorry, Lucy, you have to make me, your host has to disable the screen, whoever's the host.
On that in a minute.
Sorry, Henry, can you do that?
Disable.
Yeah. I'm just gonna. Oh.
She could be co-host as
Make her
well.
a co-host.
I'll make her a
that I can
co-host as well, yeah.
You're upset about all this.
You don't actually need to. In the
You'll
security
set.
tab, you can allow everyone to share without.
Yeah.
It's confusion.
So what we want?
Okay, I'm going to try it again. Okay.
Can you let me in and then I can help you? If you go to,
All right, yes.
go to participants on the bottom. Follow it left.
It's the world's fastest mouse.
It all.
Okay.
And I will watch it from here on out.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm going to do the beekeepers calendar. It's Marion Whittam here, and I'm the interim vice chair of the UTBA. Just to let you know that the UTBA beekeeping calendar is available to anyone on our website. It is a 24-page color calendar that contains information about what you could do indoors in the winter, in the apiary, about climate change in Toronto and the GTA. The flowers are blooming in the months of the year, and it is a lovely calendar. You can download it yourself, or you can obtain a copy from Lynn if you are a paid up member of the UTBA. And on this slide, I've put Lynn's. You just email him and he will contact you with more information. The education references I use for this presentation, I always make sure that everything is based on science. And this is the OBA Tech Transfer Program YouTube video is an excellent video that you might want to take a look at for winter bee yard preparation, how to install interest reducers, oxalic acid treatments, ventilation and wrapping. And OMAFRA also has a best management practice for winter colonies and how to prepare your hives for winter. The Honeybee Research Center at the University of Guelph also has a lot of videos that it would be very helpful to you with respect to beekeeping and closing up in the fall. And some hard copy references that I always use: Dewey Cairns, Honeybee Biology, Keeping Honeybees and the Stories Guide, and the Tech Transfer information. So one of the things that we need to take a look at is what I did is I went back to the OMAFRA report for 2021. And one of the things I found out is there's many reasons for the colony losses that we had this year, but some of the top ones are winter colony losses, ineffective mite control, weak queens, starvation, and weather problems. So winter planning for your bee colonies is really, really important to ensure the health of your bees. So weak hives, if you haven't already done so, try to combine any weak hives that you have to see if you can save them over the winter. Varroa mites, monitor for varroa mites. The OBA typical mite count for the fall is 3 mites per 100 bees in a sample. Watch for the mite drop to make sure that your treatments have been effective. You've done your treatments thoroughly. Treat the mites for appropriately following the manufacturer's instructions and also taking a look at the temperatures. There's some that can't be used at certain temperatures. Check the treatment expiry dates. Never use any product that is expired. Be sure to remove any treatments that you have put in there, any Formic Pro strips or Max strips or anything else, because if you don't, what's going to happen is your bees are going to start to get resistant to the products. And be sure to dispose of any of those treatments properly. Just make sure that they are basically disposed carefully in the garbage and so on. The Clean Farm program, unfortunately, where you can turn those particular expired treatments in it was finished in September. So unfortunately, you can't use that this year. Hopefully they'll expand that a little bit more. That was an actual place that you could drop off things to them, just like you would at a pharmacy if you had expired pharmaceutical products, but that's not happening anymore now. It's closed for this year. The Ontario Varroa Mite Monitoring Campaign is still in full swing. They're asking through the OBA to make sure that anybody that's doing mite monitoring puts in their mite levels into this app, and you fill in the survey, and at the end of the campaign, you can visit the website and take a look at the Varroa map throughout all of Ontario and see how it's tracking. So hopefully you will do that or take a look at that website. It's going to be a very valuable thing to as we try and get these mites all over Ontario under control and the best management practices for them. So the other thing is about treatments, just remember that oxalic acid treatments, it's a common question. Can I use oxalic acid? When can I use it? Remember that oxalic acid is applied when the brood rearing has ceased. And the OBA has a fact sheet on oxalic acid that's excellent. as well as as I spoke before, the Tech Transfer Center. They have a really good video on how to do the oxalic acid drizzle or dribble, as they call it. And so that's really a good one to look at. Supplemental feeding. OMAFRA tells us that a single hive should weigh between 70 and 90 pounds as a minimum, and 100 to 120 pounds for a double brood box. So based on the weights, decide if you want to use the sugar and water, but remember that it's very, very temperature dependent. Sugar compounds can be used in the form of fondant later. And take a look at the feeding guidelines for bees, again, by the OBA. In September, we had Janine McGowan talk about feeding, and I thought I would just review some quick points on feeding. Fall syrup is thicker than you would use in the spring. It's a 2-to-1 ratio of 2 parts sugar to 1 part water. So that's a very thick syrup, and it has to be stirred really well to get it into the consistency that the bees can use. If the stored syrup is too high in concentrations, it's a common cause of winter losses because of diarrhea. And each colony, they're saying the OBA, this is the OBA recommendation, should receive at least 15 liters or 4 gallons of this if they will take it. Methods of feeding are the same as in the spring, basically, but frame feeding should only be done if the temperature is above 15 C. And that's right now, it's so variable, that shouldn't be done. And barrel feeding, you have to be very careful on that because of biosecurity risks. You don't open all of the barrels at once and let everything go at once so they feed, because you're going to get robbing, you're going to get cross-contamination. So it has to be a very careful propping of the lid open so the syrup is protected, and making sure that you're not getting a lot of robbing in that. So that's just a quick review. Whether or not you decide to feed, whether or not the temperature is conducive to feeding, you just have to watch the forecast and see what happens. Another common question we get about is, what do we do about pollen and pollen substitutes? And really, pollen and pollen substitutes are critical for brood production, but since there's no winter brood production, then they're not required. And any of that uneaten pollen or pollen substitutes will attract wax moths. So the answer is, the OBA says no pollen patties. And dry sugar, the OBA also says no dry sugar because it's very, very hard. It has to be diluted. It has to have water content, and that won't happen now so much. But fondant can be used in emergency feeding over the brood at the late winter, but better still in the early spring. If it's above 10 degrees C, then you use the 1-to-1 sugar. Hive preparation. You go in, inspect your hives, of course, remove any remaining supers and queen excluders if you have not already done so. Take a look at your wraps and prepare them for winter. Determine if your hives may need shelter from the winds and try and get that in place. You'll see over here, there is a snow fence here that we have on some of our hives. Install the entrance reducers or mouse guards because you don't want those critters in your hives. And then install and secure your winter covers to insulate in either late October or early November, depending on the temperature and the weather forecast. Remember though, that when you're wrapping the hives, that you ensure there's adequate ventilation to prevent moisture buildup, and leave the upper entranceway open for the exhaust of that moisture. And the other thing you might think about doing is slightly tilting the hives forward a few degrees so that the moisture drains off. Just a quick update about the Ontario Beekeepers Association. The annual general meeting for the Ontario Beekeepers Association is November 18th and 19th in Kingston, Ontario. It will be, they're hoping, an in-person meeting. I think there will also be a hybrid version of that on Zoom. There will not be a dinner this year. Instead, there will be a games night on the Friday evening with a networking session. And this event is open to all members attending the meetings. And stay tuned for more information about the annual general meeting, the guests and the speakers. So as of October 2nd, I know Michelle had put up on our Facebook page, please complete the OBA survey. She also sent an email out about this OBA members survey. It is now currently closed. And the reason that that survey was so important is that members' feedback is really, really important to help the OBA with their 5-year strategic plan going forward. And just an update on the OBA strategic plan. Ian Grant, our OBA VP, is coordinating this project along with Michelle Wolfson, our UTBA chair, and also OBA director. There was a first meeting for the OBA volunteer members. That was on Zoom, September 19th. And volunteer members will be forming working groups to help guide the OBA initiative programs and plans for the next 5 years. And updates about the progress of these meetings will be given when available. So some very valuable work as they start to carve out their next 5-year plan. So stay tuned for more information. That's my presentation for tonight, and I'm going to turn it back to Lucy.
Thanks, Marion. Okay, we're moving on to our Be Educated session. We've got Fran Freeman with us. Fran studied apiculture and sustainable urban agriculture at the University of Guelph and has taken numerous beekeeping workshops and completed a permaculture design certificate course 10 years ago. She has managed or co-managed a number of small-scale apiaries using organic ecological practices in a variety of rural and urban settings since 2005. Currently, Fran runs bee yards at 2 Humber College campuses, as well as the Humber Arboretum, all in Toronto. She developed and teaches a 45-hour sustainable urban beekeeping course at the Center for Urban Ecology at Humber. Welcome, Fran. I think we're going to have to make Fran a co-host as well. And then Andrew down the road. Henry?
She should be fine, I think, Lucy.
Okay.
Okay.
There we go.
Minimize this. Get out of the way. I'm using John's computer and it's not cooperating for me.
It's up, Fran. We can see it.
Yeah, it's advanced. Maybe we'll just go with this anyway. I can't get back to the first slide, but I wanted to say that this is a work in progress, and I'm always interested if people come across studies or information they would like to share with me that I can add to this. So even before the World Health Organization declared a pandemic in 2020, I sensed the year was not going to go well. In January of that year, Toronto got an unprecedented amount of rain in a very short period of time, landing on solidly frozen ground. And the water had nowhere to go, and so it went up, which means that our Arboretum apiary, which is surrounded by a fence, experienced flash floods, and we lost several hives to drowning. That same year, we saw hurricane damage to beekeeping yards, and wildfire damage to apiaries in Australia. In 2021, Western Canada experienced an intense and prolonged heat wave. It was not so bad this year, but last year in BC, bee farms were seeing large numbers of queens and drones dying. Heat affects the bees' ability to mate, and at 40 degrees Celsius, bees stop mating. At 42 degrees Celsius, at least half of the drones in breeder bee yards spontaneously ejaculated and died, according to Alison McAfee of UBC. And this sounds like some sort of sick joke, but it's actually kind of terrifying. Bee breeders were losing 70% of their breeding stock. This spring, flooding in Australia destroyed an estimated 8,500 hives, about 11% of the total hives in the country. Many surviving hives were inaccessible due to flood water afterwards and mud. And of those that could be reached, many were severely weakened and then had to endure an onslaught of small hive beetle, which may have finished them off. I don't know the latest information on that. Very unhappy looking beekeeper there. Drought this year in Morocco, in Western North Africa, was the worst in 40 years. It decimated flowers and dried up drinking water. Without these resources, bees died in great numbers. Greatly impacted was a traditional beekeeping collective at the village of Nzerki, which had been in operation since 1850. About 6 weeks ago, Bee Girl posted that she was now a migratory beekeeper. So she's not a beekeeper who's been taking her hives around for pollination services. She's kept them stationary on a regenerative farm, but her 40 hive apiary, which is based in South Dakota, had been experiencing fires and drought over the past number of years, and she says it has been brutal. The bee yard is now down to 6 hives. So she had come to the conclusion that even though bees don't like being moved, under these circumstances, keeping them in one place was not really climate resistant beekeeping. So she has purchased a trailer which she can carry up to 10 hives on with a hitch and a spring-loaded, and with spring-loaded J-hooks for ratcheting the hives in place. And she plans to move them to 2 or 3 or 4 locations and elevations throughout the year to keep them safe and well nourished. She's planning to expand her beekeeping operation from her sole management to a cooperative model with a number of collaborators. This all in response to the climate change that she and the bees have been experiencing. So a major drought has major repercussions. In our part of the world, it could look something like this. Flowers produce less nectar and pollen, and bees begin consuming those foods they stored for winter prematurely and robbing weaker hives. With fewer resources, larvae have insufficient jelly, the queen may stop laying, and workers cannibalize the young. Flowers produce lower quality pollen, so that late summer bees cannot build up their fat reserves for overwintering. Bees cannot find the water they need to cool down the hive, and colonies collapse. The only upside to a scenario of high temperatures and multi-year droughts is that varroa mites' reproductive rate will also be negatively affected. If you think in terms of the varroa mite going to the brood cells to reproduce, if the queen is laying less, then there will be fewer opportunities for the mites to get completely out of hand. Researchers have been modeling possible impacts and exploring real-world climate change for a few years. Nosema tends to emerge after long wet winters. Longer, harder winters and prolonged wet springs could exacerbate this disease. Researchers found that both drier weather and hard rains could affect availability of nectar, and that long, dry autumns affected the quality and quantity of pollen that is fed on by bees to build up overwintering fat reserves, maintain a strong immune system, and keep their pathogens at bay, as well as for feeding offspring when the queen begins laying the following year. So both too little rain and too much rain can have an effect. The researchers say there's a distinction that needs to be made between local ecotypes, that is so-called bee races or strains, that adapt to local conditions, adjusting their population buildup, foraging, and winter storage, versus those bred for production for a really quick buildup in the spring, regardless of what resources are or aren't available. For example, the hybrid queen does not slow down or stop egg production because plants are not producing requisite pollen or nectar, but plows ahead producing brood. The result can be that these bees survive only if fed lots of sugar solution and artificial pollen, because the forage just isn't available to them. Climate change impacts on forage that were noted included the following. Acacia, washed by rain, dilutes the nectar, which is then not attractive to bees. In dry weather conditions, lavender will no longer produce nectar. A dry fall affects the quality and quantity of pollen produced, which will have an impact on overwintering bees who rely on it to build up their fat reserves once again. And this is from a paper, Climate Change Impact on Honeybee Populations and Diseases. I can give people the additional citations if they need them. This study looked at the impact of climate change in the form of a warmer, drier summer on winter losses. Changes to forage we've already noted. There were also impacts on parasitic varroa mite treatments, like formic acid, which is dependent on a specific range of ambient temperatures and sometimes humidity, so that the treatment can be rendered less effective or harmful to the bees if the temperatures are not appropriate. Also, warmer temperatures can mean prolonged brood rearing, such as long into the fall, long past when normally the queen would slow down or stop laying, making treatments such as oxalic acid, which needs a brood-free nest, less effective or not even possible. A study of mason bees in naturally warm climates was simulated, and the temperatures raised, such as would be experienced with climate change, by artificially warming their nests. This study found that bees emerged from overwintering over a much longer time period than normal. For example, over the course of 50, that's 50 days, instead of just 10 to 15 days. These bees emerged with smaller bodies and lower body fat, perhaps because higher temperatures caused the bees' metabolism to increase while they were hibernating, so they burned through their fat reserves faster. Because their emergence time was longer, a longer period, there were fewer floral resources available in the later period, and availability of mates was also affected. Over time, these bees could move to higher, cooler altitudes, but would their main food source do the same? Would their forage plants get properly pollinated because of the difference in emergence time? The study found 35% of the bees in the warmer nests died the first year, and 70% the second year, compared to just 1 to 2% in the control group. This study found that pollen dearth resulted from climate change, which can lead to earlier capping of brood cells and reduced nursing behavior. Lack of fresh pollen and reliance on older pollen can lead to gut dysbiosis, which is not exactly dysentery, but it's things are not working as they should, and pathogen prevalence in the gut. Dysbiosis is a loss of beneficial bacteria in the gut and the rise of microorganisms that can turn pathogenic. Poor spring and summer weather can lead to congested hives, resulting in greater disease transmission. Varroa increased with rising temperatures, but fell in numbers with wind and rain, perhaps because foraging is limited in poor weather. Sackbrood increased as temperature rose. On the upside, chalkbrood was less prevalent with rising temperatures. The impact of climate change is felt not just by honeybees, but all pollinators. and not just in dramatic ways, but also in subtler and more complex ways that can have a severe, the consequences can be as severe. So let's summarize and add a few more points. Precipitation that used to fall as snow now falls as rain, such as what we experienced in 2020 in Toronto. That's what we experienced when we had the flash flood. Flowers that used to emerge with the melting of the snowpack are now coming up much earlier. Some flowers now come up before hibernating bees have emerged, or vice versa. The bees are up before the flowers that they require are up. And so there's going to be either no bees or few bees to pollinate the flowers, or there's going to be a lack of nectar and pollen forage for the bees. Various plant species that used to flower sequentially, providing food for bees throughout the season, may now flower all at once, leaving periods of dearth when there was no food for bees. Cool temperatures and extended rains can impede bee mating flights. The offspring of some bee species emerge from their brood cells smaller and with fewer fat reserves, making them more vulnerable. This year it was noted that in looking at museum samples of different bees over a long period of time, that there was a higher and higher asymmetry between the left and right wing on bumblebees. They were very differently shaped, and you can imagine that would impede their ability to fly properly. That what they saw was that this was happening more and more in hotter and wetter years. Forming of social bees sometimes happens at unusual times of the year, or even absconding due to lack of resources, which can compromise young colonies, which may not be able to build up their numbers or lay in sufficient winter stores. Disease, pests, and pathogens, which have been confined to warmer climates than ours, or frozen and dormant in permafrost and glaciers, which are now thawing, will begin to migrate here. So now that you feel completely overwhelmed and helpless, what can be done? This is difficult to answer because the issue is so complex. The change is unpredictable and the impacts planet-wide. We know that as conditions change unfavorably, species must adapt, evolve, or migrate to new locations where conditions are more favorable, or die. But some changes are happening so rapidly that many species cannot adapt or migrate that quickly either. This is the case with bumblebees who prefer cooler temperature climates, temperate climates, and as the world heats up, cannot move quickly enough to new locations. One of the suggested solutions in the study is assisted migration, where humans move the bees north. Assisted migration is not a new idea, having been proposed since the mid-80s for any number of flora or fauna at risk. It has its fans and its detractors. Among the arguments against are concerns about relocated species displacing flora or fauna at the new locale or bringing pests and pathogens with them. Also proposed as solutions are concerted efforts to preserve natural areas at higher elevations, which would be cooler, to create cooler microclimates in the original habitat, to grow bee-friendly forage, and to expand habitat at the edges of existing ecosystems. These are a couple of small local nurseries in Toronto that grow native plants for habitat restoration. Bee Suite focuses on assisted tree migration. Restoring, enhancing, and connecting habitat is something that can be done at the individual and the community level. Xerxes recommends that when considering plantings for pollinators, 3 species of necessary plants bloom at all times, from mid-March to October. This helps mitigate phenological mismatches, so that's where the flower and the bee are emerging at different times and so are not available to each other. Though this may help generalist pollinators, more than specialists. Honeybees are generalist pollinators. They go to any number of different plants. Some bees, native bees in particular, will go only to certain plant species or families. Learn what specialist pollinators in your area need and plant that too. Provide nesting habitat for native bees. In response to a changing climate, pollinators must either move to a more favorable climate or adapt to the new one. A diverse plant community will provide a range of microclimates. Movement corridors can connect larger natural areas, which act as reservoirs of pollinator diversity, more genetic variation, and provide more chance of adaptability. And bonus, natural and restored areas also act as carbon sinks, providing additional climate solutions. And here are a couple of pollinator corridor ideas. Dr. Jonathan Lundgren, a former leading USDA research scientist who founded a regenerative farming organization and has an active farm that is testing different types of regenerative agriculture and doing research on regenerative farming, believes that a complete agricultural reform is necessary with a focus on restoring soil health and biodiversity, and that this is at the heart of bringing honeybees and native bees back. A slightly more positive conclusion from a study on the impact of severe wildfires found that bee diversity of native bees increased with the severity of the fire. The site of a 19,000 hectare fire in Oregon was sampled, and it was found that severe fire was a strong driver of bee diversity in a mixed conifer forest. Some of the bees found were relatively rare, while others were common. Flowering plant communities and exit holes used by cavity nesting bees also increased. So that was one study that had some positive things to say. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Fran. We're always happy to have you come and speak at our meetings. Does anybody have any questions for Fran? You can either put them in the chat or you can just unmute yourself and ask. No? Is this an ongoing study that you're doing, Fran?
Yeah, I'm as I said, I'm always interested if anyone comes across anything they think might fit into this. I'd be very happy to hear from them. So you can email me anytime.
Thank you, Fran. It's Marion here for a really interesting presentation. And I know a lot of research has gone into it, and I know that you're dedicated to it. So thanks so much, and continue to keep us updated.
Thank you. I'm just trying to figure out how to no longer screen share. Oh, I see. Okay, there we go.
Got it. Okay, super. Now we're moving on to our main speaker of the night. We're excited to have him, as we are all of our speakers. Andrew Coté is New York City's most well-known beekeeper, a fourth-generation apiarist. He is founder of the New York City Beekeepers Association, executive director of the 501c3 Bees Without Borders, polyglot, former university professor, and Fulbright scholar. He is a black belt in Aikido and Jiu-Jitsu. He is an author and the current head of his family's honey business, Andrew's Honey. He maintains beehives on the grounds of the United Nations, atop landmark hotels, in cemeteries, on balconies, churches, and in community gardens all over New York City. Coté and his bees have been featured on The Martha Stewart Show, CNN, CBS, Cake Boss, Dr. Oz, Nightline, Good Morning America, Today, in the Wall Street Journal, The Atlantic, The New York Times, The New Yorker, HuffPost, NPR, and many other news outlets around the world. Penguin Random House published his book, Honey and Venom,
It was printed in
Professions of-
Canada, by the way.
Sorry?
It was printed in Canada.
Oh, there you go. Yes, Penguin is,
know.
yeah. And he's actually, his family is formerly from Canada. We lost him to the States.
They're still from Canada.
Okay. When not working with his bees in New York City, Andrew is usually in sub-Saharan Africa building bee fences to keep elephants out of villages or elsewhere in the world, working bees along with his son, Nubuaki. After reading this, I am really happy that you could take the time out of your day to talk to us, because it sounds like you have never-ending bee escapades. So we're happy to have you and welcome.
Hello, everyone. I am not so fluid with this, and I'd like to share my screen. Anybody feel like just telling me? I'm sure it's not crazy, but I don't know what to do. So.
On the bottom, there's a green button that says share screen.
Well, that. Okay, yeah,
okay.
wow. Makes a lot of sense. Okay. Boom.
There we go.
So let me make sure I'm in the right place. Okay. Hello, and just sorry. How long would you like me to go on? Because I can, you know, adjust to your schedule. I don't know.
You know what? You can go as long as you like, and then if people have to leave, people have to leave.
Okay. Well, yeah. Be careful. Okay. All right. Hello, everybody. So I'm sorry I couldn't be there. I would like to have come up. My father is from Quebec, but I don't know how you feel about the French speaker. So sorry if, you know, I know there's a little, but it's okay because now he speaks English, kind of. He moved with his family, much of his family, to Connecticut. So I'm sure you know that's part of New England, but just barely, because we're about in our town about 20 minutes from New York City, from the Bronx, and next is Manhattan, where I live now. Although right now I'm in Connecticut because there's always work to do to close up the beehive. So. I've got a short presentation. Oops, hello. How do I, this is a video. There it is. Am I sharing it correctly? Should I be doing something different before I keep going?
Henry, can you just explain how you can get rid of the rest of the screen?
Yeah, you just need to press play at the top.
That might be his sound.
Like that? Thank you. Sorry. Really. I'm older than all of you, and I'm not interested in learning any new tricks. So this is one of my apprentices. Every year I take 6 to 8 apprentices. By the way, I want to point out, I started keeping bees around 10 years old. I learned from my father, who learned from his mother, who learned from her father, who learned from his father. So they're from Temiskaming, very far north. Canada, excuse me, Quebec, along the border with Ontario. I'm sure some of you at least know where it is. I can't think of a reason for you to go there really, other than maybe to visit an old auntie. But anyway, that's where my people are from, my paternal people anyway. So I don't know much about you all, meaning I know you're a beekeeping group. I'm going to assume that some of you have gotten your hands sticky a little bit, at least, and maybe some of you. It sounds like Fran is extremely knowledgeable, and I really enjoyed that presentation, Fran, about what's going on. And the first one about the winterizing was fantastic. I'm sorry I didn't catch the name, but we have very similar goings-ons here for the winter, although I think you get your winter a bit sooner than we do. So I'm going to skip a couple things because I don't need to explain to you, do I? What the queen's job is, what the worker's job is. We all know that. Okay. So I'm going to pass. I'll pass my crass, canned jokes about the mating and what happens to the drone and how he falls with, I presume, mixed emotions to the earth after his dalliance. Here we are. Oh, this is my father and I. My father's on the right. This is when my hair was still mostly black and when my father's hair was still in evidence. But we've worked together for quite a long time. We still do. This is my elder son, Maxime. He's now taller than that hive, certainly taller than I. And this was my my latest pollination project, although he's much older now. This is Nobuaki. So, and there we are, 3 Coté men from beekeeping stock. We have about 500 hives, which I don't know for you, does it sound like a lot or not, but it makes us sideliners. We aren't commercial, I wouldn't say, because the way we think of it anyway down here is 1,000 plus, you're a commercial, 100 to 1,000, you are a sideliner, and under 100, you're a hobbyist. So that's sort of how we look at it. And I don't really want to have more hives. I'd even be happier with fewer, because I want to give them a lot of care and individualized attention, and I try to do that. But we get several varieties of honey on the far left. You're looking at buckwheat. In the center, you're looking at wildflower, and on the far right, you'd be looking at linden or basswood. I don't know how do you call it up there, but different people here call it different things. And there we are. So we sell our honey at farmers markets. We sell it to a few grocery stores, but we're in the enviable position that we cannot produce as much as there is a demand. And that's really true, I think, of most beekeepers. Many beekeepers, you know, will supplement their honey. They'll buy in bulk in barrels or pails, and they'll you know, pass it off as their own. And I'm not exactly passing judgment, but we aren't quite in that camp. Sometimes I will buy something from another beekeeper who has something that I don't produce, but I'll label it as such, something that's interesting that I like, but I can't produce, like a sour wood or meadow foam or something like that. So in New York City, we've got this New York City Beekeepers Association, although during COVID time, we sort of slowed down to a grinding halt, but we're trying to start up again this year. And certainly for next year, we'll be off and running. But we started, I think, in 2006 or 7. I can't remember exactly. And at that time, beekeeping was unlawful in New York City. But no one really cared, meaning there were fines, there were violations potentially to be had, but there was no enforcement, mostly because there were so few beekeepers that there wasn't really a problem. So this is in Harlem, this photo. One thing about this building and one thing about urban beekeeping is that there's often a lot of carrying heavy things up and down stairs. This was a 7-story building with no elevator. So on the one hand, we're very happy to have those full supers that weighed about 50 pounds each. On the other hand, we had to carry them down the stairs one at a time. So this is, this is an interesting hive. Have any of you ever seen this? It's called a Kirchhoff hive. Kirchhoff, anybody? Not that I can hear or see you, but well, it's called the Kirchhoff hive. And you'll notice there on the left, on the right, on the bottom, sort of 2 sets. Anyway, those are 2 different colonies with 2 different queens and 2 different sets of workers. And there in the center, there's a queen excluder, which I know some people call a honey excluder, but I like them. I like using them because it keeps the brood out of my honey. Anyway, the way it works is with the Kirchhoff hive, essentially, it is bone dry all winter because it's got a double layer of wood. It's a little complicated, but you can find the patent for it. It came out in the 1970s. You can find it online for free, but it's extraordinarily complex to build. This is one of the original ones. We have a few. And the bees keep each other warm and they work together making the honey. They're happy to work together up there north of the queen excluder. It's interesting, and the hives work very well. It's my favorite type of hive, and is relatively unknown. This is on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. This is on top of a church, St. Mary's Church. It's been there since 1836. This is the top of the Waldorf Astoria, which is closed at the moment and is now being turned into condos. I think the condos start at $28 million for a 1-bedroom. If anyone is interested in moving to New York, now is the time. You can get a place in this iconic building. So we had bees up there. We're going to put them back. We took Michelle Obama to visit these bees. That was a very nice moment. But beekeeping in New York City is not new. There have been beekeepers in New York City since at least the 1840s. There were beekeepers breeding queens on top of a building on Park Place in Brooklyn, and they sent those queens all over the world. They went to the Sandwich Islands, they went to Mozambique, they went everywhere in the world. And there was a woman who kept bees in the 1920s on top of some buildings in what is now known as the Canyon of Heroes, Lower Broadway, down in the financial district. She had about 40 beehives. It's not new. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun, right? But beekeeping in New York City and in cities in general isn't new, but it certainly has picked up in popularity. And we were able to legalize beekeeping in 2010 through petitions and what do you call it? The Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, which is a very strange name. They're the ones who regulate beekeeping and mosquitoes and a lot of other things in New York City. They had a hearing, a public hearing, and basically it was allowed because no one spoke against it. No one minded one way or the other. So with very few regulations, it went through. So beekeeping in New York City is still a little bit wild because there were so few regulations put in place. I think to the detriment ultimately of urban beekeeping. I think it's going to become a problem. And there really wasn't the resources put behind it. So there isn't really a bee inspector, for example, for New York City. There's one for New York State. It's a big state, as you know. So mostly people in New York City get packages of bees brought in. It used to be exclusively my domain, and I liked that. But now there are dozens and dozens of people who bring in bees and sell bees. So I don't do it as much, but this is looking through a package of bees. It's just hanging around. And this is in Brooklyn looking, I guess from the bees point of view, BPOV, installing a package. And anyway, we've got them all over. This is, where is this? Chelsea, installing packages. These aren't mine. I don't, these are those plastic packages I think that Man Lake sells. I believe they come from Olivares, and nothing against either company. I can't stand that plastic waste. So I don't buy them like that myself. Anyway, I think it might be a little better because it's very weird sitting here in this kitchen, not seeing or hearing you. I think we might be better off, and at least one of you would be interested if you were to ask me questions, because I feel like I'm just alone. So does anybody want to ask a question about beekeeping in New York, or legalizing beekeeping, or what that man is thinking? Is he wearing anything under that veil? I mean, you can ask whatever you want.
I think there's a way you can turn on your to see us in the little video tabs, so you don't feel all by yourself.
I do. I'm feeling very lonely and very sad. I bet you're right.
Just don't share.
We're all listening to you, and most of the time when you were speaking, me personally, I'm shaking my head because I have kept bees on roofs. I have had to carry beehives through the opera company downtown. I have had to go up and down elevators with them and stairs and all kinds of stuff. And I prefer not to, of course. I've kind of stopped doing that. So definitely we've had that experience. One of the things that we experience at the Canadian Opera Company is in downtown Toronto, and it's a gravel roof. It's not very high, maybe 3 or 4 stories, but we can't overwinter bees there very well. We really have to bring them to a more sheltered and kind of area. Do you find that you have locations that are in the downtown that just don't overwinter well? Because up on the roof, there's like really different climatic conditions, wind, water, than there is like, on a green field.
Well, yes, overwintering bees on rooftops is very challenging. But generally I have to either figure out how to do it or accept that I may have a loss, because to carry them up and down is just not practical for me. Having so many, I have 103 in the city, and they're not all on rooftops, but most of them are. The image now is from the United Nations on the North Lawn. I landed there somehow. But I will wrap the hives on the roofs in tar paper. I'm sure you do things like that. In a couple of locations, I'm able to get up bales of hay and I put them around it, but that's only 2. Where there's just great access or a forklift can reach the roof or something like that. But usually I just reduce, wrap, and in the worst case, put up some posts and some burlap, anything for a windbreak. Or where I placed them originally, I try to make sure it has a north windbreak, which is where most of the wind comes from in our case, and probably yours. But I also avoid a lot of places that I might keep bees, but I know that they're not going to be good. For example, anywhere near the river. And of course, Manhattan's a long, skinny island, so it's hard to not be right near the river. But if it's a tall building near the river and it's very windy in the spring and the summer, I know it's going to be too windy in the fall. So for me, the biggest challenges of beekeeping in New York City are, and it may sound like a joke and it's funny, but it's not a joke, are traffic and parking. Just to get from one spot to another with my truck. And often I can park my truck and then just take a subway or a bicycle and go from one apiary to the next. But also, just as often, I have equipment that I need to bring or to take. And I can't do that on a bicycle generally. Although I fit things on a bicycle, one shouldn't be able to fit like swarms and swarm equipment and so on. But I'm sure the traffic is bad up there. It can't be worse though than what we experience. So driving in New York City and then finding parking, which is an Olympic level activity, is tough. Then of course, going up and down those stairs. And another thing that's tricky about New York City beekeeping, and I imagine in Toronto and elsewhere, is access, meaning you've got the building, you've got the okay, everything's fine, but then you need perhaps the engineer to bring you up in the elevator. You have to find the person with the key to this door or that door. And it just becomes this arduous task and not the joy that's meant to be. But maybe that's because I have so many locations. It is a job, and I'm going to guess that most of you are hobbyists and are enjoying your one location or two, and that's great because that's what it's supposed to be, fun. I enjoy it once I'm there. When I'm in the hive, it's meditative and it's wonderful, and it really does, as corny as it sounds, like fills me with love for my father and my family, and but getting there is hard.
That you absolutely need to come to Toronto, because we absolutely have to prove to you that there is traffic as bad as New York. I do.
I believe you. I believe you.
I believe
I'm sorry to hear it.
I do have hives in a variety of locations around the city, and I have picked up swarms from downtown Toronto. And I'll tell you, I have a landscaping trailer for my bicycle that I use because I can never bring my equipment close enough to where the swarm is with my car because there is no parking. You just can't. So I definitely have done that. And I also have hives at the Ontario Centre for Forensic Science. So think CSI, basically, for Ontario. And the security in there, I can't tell you how many large 6 foot or 12 foot tall steel gates I have to go through to get into my hives. But I'm telling you, once I have my bee jacket on, or if I have hives in the car, those security guards can't press those buttons fast enough to get me in there.
Yeah, I know that you're right, because that bee suit has repelled the Secret Service. Like when we were at the Waldorf, that was the only hotel where the president would stay, whomever the president was, and many visiting dignitaries. So that suit really does literally open doors. You're quite right.
So how many different locations do you keep your 500 hives?
Well, 100 or so are in New York City, and the other 400 are outside of the city. So the 100 or so in the city, they're in about 20 locations. So I've got some with 1 or 2, I've got some with 8 or 9. Oh, I'm not counting, sorry, there's one spot in Queens where I have about 40, but I'm not counting those in the 100. Then I've got them in Long Island, I've got them in Connecticut and Fairfield County and Westchester County, New York, and a little bit in New Jersey, some bridge and tunnel honey. So I've got them all within about 80 miles of Manhattan. So, because of traffic, it takes a long time, but generally I'll get up with no complaint, because I like to, at 4 or 5 in the morning. I'll drive as far as I'm going to have to go that day, and I just work my way back, and it's really not so terrible. It's just sort of like within the city that it's annoying. But even then, I try to make it a Sunday morning thing when there's no one else around. So there are ways around it. I love the idea of the bicycle with the landscape trailer. That's pretty clever.
Just out of curiosity, how do you find like your sort of more remote apiaries as compared to the ones that you have in the city in terms of managing them, in terms of the honey they produce, the quantity of honey?
Well, the answer now in 2022 is that I produce, or my hives produce much more honey in the rural areas than they do in Manhattan. But that's because beekeeping has increased exponentially in the last decade. For example, I take care of a lot of corporate accounts. I've got beehives on buildings for companies like Brooks Brothers and Durst and a lot of other places. And I was the only person who did that for a while. And I knew others would start doing it, and they did, and it's fine. It's a big city, but it's gotten so popular that there's a company in Boston who has a whole team whose job it is just to call companies and ask, would you like bees on your roof? And then there's one in Canada that does that too. And there's others.
New York City?
That may be a name I've heard. And so, yeah, it's okay. But the result, everyone's allowed to do their own thing, but it has resulted in the quantity of honey going way down. And I know that this problem has existed in London for quite some time, that the amount of honey produced is much less than it once was. So for me, for honey production, I generally put my hives in more remote places like Queens, Long Island, Connecticut, where there are more trees, fewer hives, less competition for the bees, and they do better. For clients who want bees, as long as I can keep those bees safe and keep my conscience clear, I'll do it. explaining to them and preparing them for the fact that they may not have a windfall of honey. They won't have a windfall of honey. They may get none. I had one client who wanted bees on the 72nd floor of a hotel. And I sort of inherited this from another beekeeper because the bees kept dying. And I told them, you know, this is not going to be good for the bees. I'll try it for a year because you already have the bees and the equipment and they are there. So yes, I will. But I think the bees had to go, so I figured out something like a third of a mile up from the park. That's a long way and there's a lot of wind. Anyway, I convinced them after a year to move them down to the 30-something floor, and that's still not great. But it's hard because people want to say things like, we have the highest apiary in the world. And that's a fun boast. But if they really care about the bees, as I'm sure we all do, then maybe having them up there is okay for a couple of shots and then take them down to a place where they can do their thing and be healthy. So to answer the question, I produce much less in the city than I do from outside of the city.
One of the questions was, do you sell it by zip code and then sell it that way? Do you
No,
extract?
there is someone who's doing that. He is in Queens. He's my friend Tom. He took my class about 12 years ago. Oh, check this out. Hold on. Watch. This is real. This isn't CGI. We keep bees in a cemetery way downtown, and the Monsignor, who's a little bit of a nutcase in the best possible sense, he has sheep to keep the grass down. So I was setting this up for something else, and that sheep just wanted in on it. So do I sell by zip code? No. What I do is I write on the lids. I wish I had some here. I write on the lids where the honey's from, the neighborhoods, Chelsea, West Village, Central Park, wherever it's from. But there's a fella named Tom who does it by zip code in Queens. So it is, whomever thought that maybe was looking at his, and it makes me proud. Like I don't mind competition. I don't see it as competition when somebody who I taught beekeeping to opens up a little beekeeping shop. I mean, there are, I don't know, 8 million people on this island. It's okay. We can have 10 beekeepers. I mean, I'm going to sell my honey anyway. You know, there's a finite amount that I produce, and it's going to be enough to pay my bills. And so that's cool. And it's nice that Tom, who, you know, he used to sell wine. He was a wine merchant, a wine wholesaler. And then he lost his job during the pandemic. So thank goodness he has this skill and he does this. And then there's a good buddy of mine named Flynn, and he has now taken over the Bronx for honey production. And his daughter is doing a Timberland ad right now. You should follow him. He has a funny feed. He's aesthetically very displeasing, but still a very, very nice man. His Boogie Down Bronx Honey. So there, I'm promoting him, not even me, but you can follow him. And Tom, the guy with the zip code honey, his is Wilk Apiary, W-I-L-K. And there's a lot of good people down here doing, and everywhere doing bees. I've met, bees have been the conduit for me, not only to have a better relationship with my children and my father, but other people around the world. When I go anywhere, what does my wife call it? Waste all my time talking about bees, but it's not a waste. It's fun. I mean, it's there are worse habits to have, I guess.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a couple questions?
Yes, please.
Okay. Also, lots of people speak French. J'ai de la famille de Témiscamingue aussi. So, yeah, small world. But I wanted the other picture that you had, the way that you had your hives on those 4x4 posts. Do you dig post holes and pour concrete and put them in, or do you have like a flat kind of pad that you attach it to? I'm curious about this.
I will tell you. And I was thinking to try to respond to you in French, but my father laughs at my French, so I don't want to embarrass myself and his legacy.
Well, there was something that came up. I wasn't sure whose thing that said that
Fran, we can hear you.
you needed more
Fran?
of the cloud, something that was running out. which doesn't make any particular sense, but.
Is she asking me a question?
No, she's not.
Okay. So the post, sorry, you asked me about the
Yeah.
post. So yes, we used a post hole digger and we dig straight down
Okay.
1 meter because
Yep.
my father is, a crazy Canuck who wants to make everything sure to work and not to have to do it twice. And so we have these posts in the ground that have been in the ground for a quarter century and they haven't moved. And we put them in and we've got the level and make them perfect, put big rocks, bang, bang, and they're in there. No cement. You don't need cement if you do it right, he tells me. So yeah.
Okay, cool. That's hardcore. And then my second question is, do you have access to our little chat box? Can you see?
No, I'm sure I have access to it, but I don't see it. So let me
Okay.
find it.
So if you scroll your mouse down to the bottom of the screen,
Okay.
in the middle, there's little icons. It says participants, then a little thing that says chat next to where that share screen
Oh.
button.
Wait, it's on top.
Oh, yours might be switched
Do
up.
you extract by zip code and sell that way is the last one I see.
Yeah. So in there, you can respond. Would you happen to have any, or maybe you can respond later. Do you have any links to those Kirchhoff hives you were talking about? Because I tried to look online and there's not a whole lot of information and they look pretty interesting.
I don't have a link because Kirchhoff died a year after he patented it, and then nobody did anything with it for 30 years. Then
Oh.
one other guy started to make them, and then his wood shop burned to the ground. So no one is making them. You can't find them, but I love them. And I would like to make them. And I believe the patent was 1976, but I have it somewhere. And if Lucinda or you, my email is beekeeper71@gmail.com. If anybody wants to, anybody wants to email me about anything, but about that in particular, I'm gonna do a search and find what I have. Because at one point I was trying to make them, but they're very complicated and it was more time than I could invest to make them. But they're wonderful and they're going to be more expensive, but I believe will be worth it. Because mainly they keep the hive dry all winter. And as we all know, it's not the cold that kills the bees, it's the wet cold, it's the damp cold. So
Beekeeper71 at
Gmail.
Gmail.
Beekeeper71 at Gmail. I'm not 71, but I might have been born around, well, I guess I'm approaching. I wanted to show you all also some of the swarms in New York City. Some of them are great. They're beautiful. It's like when Lucifer, the most beautiful angel, left heaven, and took a third of the angels with him. This is what I think of when I think of a swarm. This one, the cyclist was upset, not because of the bees, but he felt that we were not removing them quickly enough. So we stopped and had lunch, and then we went back another hour later. They were still there. We figured either the problem would solve itself or he would wait. This is in front of Louis Vuitton, and I helped Nicolas install the bees on Louis Vuitton in Paris and in the Grand Palais, but he's not there anymore. He is in California now. This is his company. He's part owner of this company, the one in Canada now, that's down here and everywhere. But it was interesting because this was a few hours before the Puerto Rican Day Parade, which there's no reason you would necessarily know about this parade, but it's the biggest, loudest, most boisterous parade that New York City has. And a lot of people are coming down. This is Fifth Avenue, loud, perhaps drinking. And so having this beehive there would not have been great. So we of course took it. I think this one we had to brush them. We didn't have anything to vacuum them. Sometimes they're in really difficult to reach locations like this one, and we had to reach over the side of the building. Now the truth is, there is absolutely no good reason at all for a person to pick up this swarm. The smart thing to do would be to leave it right where it is and let them fly away. This is, as you can see, pretty high up, and that's stupid me. And my right leg is being held like an anaconda by one of my apprentices, but she probably weighed half of what I weigh. So I would have just taken her with me. But there's something in the mind of a beekeeper, I'm sure you'll agree, it just makes us go after swarms. It's worse than catnip to a feline, I'm sure. But there are all kind of swarms all over. Oh, you know, you can't see the swarm here, but this is in Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn, Bedford-Stuyvesant. I'm not sure why this picture's here, but there's one guy who's very, very, very tall, and there's another guy who's rather, I don't know, lumpy. I'm not sure why this picture's here, but this is what they usually do. They tape it off. They have a couple of cops standing there, and they call me or one or two other people to do it. But one of our most interesting swarms that we ever got was this building here, right in the center of Times Square. One thing interesting about this building, this is where the New York Times was printed once upon a time, Times Square. That's where the name came from. It had another name before that. But this building, only the ground floor is occupied. All the rest, just advertisements. The owners realized they made much more money just by putting up these flashing billboards than to bother renting it out to anybody. But this was the most spectacular swarm that I think I ever had to get. Something like 19 floors up, and it was great. It was great. And one thing that was kind of funny, we did not know at the time, here it is looking down, right across the street, exactly across the street, was Reuters offices. So while we were up there, they were filming and taking pictures. And so by the time we got to the ground, it was all over, and it was kind of cool. So you those of you who have gotten them, swarms are fun. They're exciting. It's sort of an illusion of danger because we know that bees are docile when they're swarming and they're calm. But it's a fun party trick. And it's nice to get free bees, and it's nice to save these group of bees because most bees that swarm end up not surviving unless they're rehomed. So, and I'm sure if you've read, I'm sure you have some of the stuff about swarms by Dr. Tom Seeley. You'll know that. I don't remember the percentage, but it's quite a low percentage of swarms that make it on their own.
It's 25%, only 25% of primary swarms make it, and then less than 10% of secondary and tertiary swarms make it.
Thank you so much. Yes, I didn't want to give a false stat to a room full of beekeepers. Thank you. So what else can I tell you? Anything else you're interested in knowing about?
Leith asked, can you tell us about your intern program?
Yes. Oh, I see it now. Okay. Lead Drury to everyone. Yes, I can. So we take usually 6 to 8 apprentices per year. And I don't like to take more because I want everybody to have real personalized experiences with the bees. Also, I could fit 5 or 6 people in my truck. Most people don't all come every day. And this way we can, get around. We start February and March with classes, with the theoretical. We do 12 to 18 hours of theoretical depending on the year. And then we just go soup to nuts. We begin by building the equipment during that theoretical, installing bees from packages and splitting colonies and cleaning out the dead outs, everything. I try very hard for the new beekeepers to get their hands all over the equipment without the bees on them, because then they have a lot more confidence when it's time. Also, to build the equipment from scratch. So I want them both to build it, and I want them to clean out the dead outs. One, I hate cleaning dead outs, and it's fun to have them do it. But two, they really get to understand the equipment very well. And it's not scary, because when you have a frame with no bees on it, you can understand it quite well and dissect it. And if you've built it, also all the better. But so we do that, and we just go forward for the whole year. We almost always meet on Sundays, but usually April, May, June, July, there's some opportunity 7 days a week for the apprentices to come. And what most don't have the opportunity though, but I'm always working bees, right? So I think for the last 3 or 4 years, I've had a WhatsApp chat, and I just say, okay, tomorrow the weather looks like this. From 10 a.m. it'll be warm enough. We're gonna meet here. And that's it. And then we go. And then we can just keep saying by 1 o'clock, we're gonna be here or there. Some people, they drop in and out. So it's like that. And they get one beehive sort of assigned to them. And that's their hive that they cultivate all year long. It's, not their hive, but they're responsible for it. And we do everything. Yeah, that's it. We have a little bit of a competition because we get more applicants usually than I can take, but I don't want it to just be, 25 people, and then it's just hard, because I end up getting lots and lots of messages from them, and I want to respond, and I want to give them everything that I have to give about it. But if I divide myself too much, I'll get grumpy with them, and it's not fun for anybody.
So you do have a waiting list?
I wouldn't say we have a waiting list, because I don't keep any kind of a waiting list. I just take applications starting in January. I like to meet the person in person and talk to them and just sort of get a feel for their expectations. And usually I then have the person go with me, like they'll take the class, the theoretical part, and then they'll come out once or twice actually handling the bees. And then we can together make the decision, because I've had people join it and just find out it's just not for them. And I don't want that person to feel committed. And I also don't want them there if they're not committed. So I don't make a waiting list. It's just every year it rolls and rolls. I'm not so organized.
You can take more people into the theoretical part than
Yes.
you can when you actually get working with the hives.
Yes, the theoretical part, we take up to 75.
Wow.
And we usually fill up. That's how much the room holds. There's a small university that allows us to use their space at a very, very good price. But in the last couple of years, COVID, but the year or two before that, our numbers dropped. They were always full classes, 50 to 75, depending on what room we were renting. They were always full. But other people are teaching the classes now, or there's so much stuff online, or since COVID, there's so many Zoom opportunities. So, it's okay, but it has changed the game for us. And people like Tom, who took my class 10 years ago, he has an internship program now. And so does another fella, and so does somebody else. And so, there's more people doing it. So we have fewer people trying, but it's okay. There's still plenty who are interested. And, honestly, there's so much attention to this thing, urban beekeeping. It's very nice, but I would do it anyway. It's nice, but if nobody was looking, I would still do it because I like it.
Thank
And
you.
I want my children to understand the hard work ethic of beekeeping, this Calvinistic approach to life, because I think that's important. I do not, however, want my children to continue and to do this as a vocation. I don't think it's sustainable. I'm afraid that we're just ruining the planet and the bees and things too much. I want them to do this as a hobby but do something else. I'm sorry to say. I want to be the last generation to do this like this.
How many children do you have?
I have two boys right now. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. One I'm a little, I have not a lot of use for him right now, but you know, he'll come around, you know, we'll figure each other out. But he's 15, so we're not supposed to be best friends right now, I guess.
No. Be patient.
No, I'm waiting. I'm waiting. I don't see the light yet, but I know it's there. So I'll be patient. And no one was worse than I was, according to my parents and everyone else. So I'm reminded regularly, and keeping that in mind.
And
So,
you also know the magic of the bees.
I do. They've been very generous with me. And plus, when I was 15 and 20 and maybe up until 30, I really was the best beekeeper. I knew everything about the bees and everything else. But slowly I began to realize that I may have been mistaken. And now in my 50s, I am quite aware that I know less and less, but it's nice because I get to learn more with the bees every year, about the bees and from the bees. And that's good. I mean, a lot of young people have their hubris, and I was no exception. But yeah, now I'm just trying to be a good example for my boys and their friends and our community. And I don't know what else to do, you know. Then later I'll die. That's it.
I have a question about the apprenticeship.
Yes.
So New York's kind of a big, diverse city. So is Toronto. A lot of feedback from folks that I've got was that it's really hard in Toronto for Black and racialized beekeepers and aspiring beekeepers to tap into beekeeping space because it's predominantly white. Do you feel like you encounter that same thing in New York City? Has there been ways to plug into, making it more accessible? Is it already accessible and this is just a Toronto thing?
It is accessible here. For example, the Island Bee Project, I think is the name of 3 young people who are all, I'm not sure how they identify, so I'm going to say, and I may be wrong, and I'm sorry, women of color. I don't know how they're casting themselves, but if you can find Island Bee Project, very interesting, 3 young people. I have my farmers market is through Grow NYC, and they have these farmer apprenticeship programs, and it's all for minority people. So I have 2 young people who apprentice with me. Apart from the apprenticeship I talked about, this is just sort of a special thing. They sometimes overlap. The fellow I told you about, Flynn from the Bronx, you'd think he was disfigured, but he was actually just, he's a man of color. So it's accessible, but like anything, you know, it's not as accessible because it still costs money. You still have to have a place to put things. It's easier to put it on your own roof than on a roof that you rent. So we certainly could improve, but there is no sort of idea that no one should be included, if that makes sense. I know most beekeepers traditionally are old white guys like me, but when I look around at our meetings, I am not looking at a bunch of faces that look like mine, and that encourages me a little bit. And quite frankly, I would really prefer to see more people who look different than me, because I'm not quite sure that we've done a phenomenal job with the world. So it's okay with me if some other folks screw it up, so I can blame them. That would be fine with me. But yeah, we do all right. We could do better.
Cool, thanks.
You're welcome.
Do you have any pictures of that statue that you did at MoMA? And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can. I'm gonna try to, oops, hold on. Yeah, I'm gonna. So there's an artist named Pierre Huyghe, who's from France. And if you know anything about French artists, you'll know that they're the best thing since sliced bread. I mean, ask them. And anyway, he actually his office wrote to me. Am I still sharing my screen? I'm just asking.
No.
No, okay. I'm going to find it and then I will again. I'm going to find what I'm looking for. Boom. Boom. There. Okay, so hold on. So anyway, he found and I hit play, I was told. Wait. There it is. Boom. Okay, so he took a copy of a Max Weber statue and he needed bees to be on the head. So anyway, the MoMA asked me to help with the bees. And it was funny because his artist studio had contacted me 3 or 4 years before and asked me how they could do this thing with the bees. And I told them, and then they did it, apparently. So these are 2 beehives we put on top of the MoMA. We made them look like buildings because we thought it would be cool because they're on the MoMA. And this is the young lady who helped me do a high school student. That's another thing. Get high school students to do things for you. Free labor. They get credit for uni or whatever they do. It doesn't matter. There it is. So this is called Untilled. And this is it. In fact, it's coming back to MoMA next year. I'm going to do it again. And so I had this big hunk of cement dumped on my farm in Connecticut, and I had 3 months to get the bees to build that comb on this thing's head. And I had these 2 very stylish, very skinny, very bored looking, smoking French girls come to the house like once a month, just looking really bored and telling me like, trim it this way, do it that way. So they wanted it to look natural, but they wanted us to make it look natural. It was good. It was like an old Depardieu movie kind of. So this was this was fun. This was a lot of fun. I really is that a video? No, I really enjoyed doing it. Oh, there's my father. He's the one on top. Yeah, that statue was crazy, and we had it there in the sculpture garden. We had it there all summer. And then when it was time to remove it, we took a low suction vacuum, took all the bees off, picked Her Majesty up and took her away. And that was it. Yeah, that was crazy. That was really good. I don't know. I know it was done also in Japan because they had me help them over there, and it was done in Germany and probably elsewhere. And I'm not aware. I wasn't really following him that much. I just was glad that they asked me to do it again because it means that they didn't find me too abrasive. It also means they didn't read my book because I wasn't exactly like super complimentary to the artist. But I tell it like it is. If people want me to write about them in a nicer way, they have to behave better. That's all. It's simple.
So how did you do it? Or is that a trade secret now?
Well, I did not sign anything that said I can't tell anyone. I did not write about it in the book, but I feel we know each other, so I'm going to tell you. I took a queen, put her in a queen cage and stuck her in between there, and I built a box around that head, which has these little slats of fake comb, like a plastic comb, and they swarmed twice. And then the third time, my father had the idea, so he really saved this. We stuffed honeycombs that were full of honey, and we did a cutout that had brood and stuffed that where it couldn't be seen inside that headpiece. And because of the brood and the food, the bee stayed long enough to begin to build. We built the box out, but we had it on sliders. And anyway, voila, there it is. It worked. But I also went and saw it in Los Angeles, and it didn't work there. But it wasn't the beekeeper's fault. It was just the wrong time of year. Around here, they're going to build comb in, I don't know, March, April, May. That's about it here anyway. So we started it in April, I think. Yeah, we started it in April. So it worked out well, I think. One thing that surprised me is though it didn't get a lot of press coverage. I thought it was so unusual it would get some. It got some, but it was like the New York Post, which is kind of a rag. And it said, bee-headed, I don't know, the puns weren't that good. I felt like they could have, you know, done more with it. But it was right out there. It was 10 feet away from the general public. I think over 100,000 people a week filed past it. Nobody was stung. And so it was a success, I think.
That's neat.
I am sorry, but I have to go kind of soon, maybe another 5 minutes. If you guys have any other questions, I have to drive back to New York tonight, and it's tonight. I don't know if you have anyone there who celebrates it, but it's a big holiday. Started at sundown tonight for my wife's family. So I am already slightly in the doghouse, but you know, I don't want to be fully and utterly in there. So. If you want to ask me anything else, I'm happy to answer it. But
Does anybody have any questions?
This is a very self-serving question, but I have family in Harlem.
oh yeah,
Yes, 137th West Side. And
Yeah.
I'm actually going to New York City on Friday, but maybe not this visit, but sometime could I email you, and when I'm going to be there, have a visit?
I would really love it. Please do
my
that.
God.
Goes for you and for anyone. I have 2 beekeepers visiting right now. One is from Luxembourg Gardens, and the other one is from London. They're good friends with each other and now with me. And they're here now. And I used to live in Harlem when before I was married, and I still have the apartment. They're staying there. So yeah, for sure. And I will do my best. You're coming this Friday, like as in later this week?
Like later this week.
Okay, I will be at the Union Square Farmers Market all day Saturday. If you happen to be around, I'll be there from 6 a.m. till 6 p.m. So you've got a nice window if you want to try.
Okay, gorgeous.
All right.
I
But
know.
also email me. Absolutely. It would tell me your name. I can't. Oh, your
It's
Drury.
Drury.
Oh, that's the last name. Sorry.
Lee is my first name.
Lee. Okay.
Lee.
Yeah,
Yes.
definitely. And I don't care if you and I meet in New York, let people talk. Who cares? I don't care what they said. If you and I meet, have a little wine, whatever.
Oh, that's fabulous. Thank you very, very much. And thank you for your presentation.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm sorry if I'm scattered, but this is how I am. So sorry.
Thank you very much.
My friend, but we didn't have time to talk with him. He was here the whole time. Sorry, instead of poking it the whole time. I don't know.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks, everybody. Sorry if I seem weird on this. I'm it's just strange medium, but I enjoyed talking with you all. I'm sorry that I couldn't get up there to do it in person, but really, if any of you ends up in New York, let me know. Follow Lee's example, and if not, I'll find you somewhere sometime.
Super.
Thank you. Merci.
Merci à vous.
Oui, c'est ça. Merci.
Oh, if you want, you could our Instagram, prepared to be underwhelmed, but it's just Andrew's honey. Yeah. Andrew's honey. Yeah. Okay. Bye, guys.
Okay,
Bye.
bye-bye. And that concludes our meeting for tonight. It was a lot of fun. Thank you for coming. We have another great meeting coming in November, where we have our beekeeping calendar with Marion as usual. We have Be Educated with Susan Cormier, and I'm not sure if you saw her advice to a new beekeeper. She wrote an award-winning letter, so she's actually going to come and read it for us at next meeting. And we have Paul Kelly. We have Paul Kelly, and he wants to be here in person. So if you're feeling up to it, come down to U of T. You'll be able to see the guru, Paul Kelly. We're excited about that. And to go along with that, we are going to be providing a dinner that has honey in a lot of things. We sent around an email for you to reply to if you're going to be attending, so we know how much to make. And hopefully we will see you in November.
And I'm also going to be bringing my honey samples for everyone from traveling for us to sample. So I was going to bring them this meeting, but since some of you are sick and away,
I just saw your email. That's fantastic. I can't wait to
not
try.
too much. It's not too much stuff going on in that meeting.
No,
Okay.
you know
Cool.
what? It'll be a crazy meeting, but that's okay. It's okay.
The sugar will keep going.
That's right. And on that note too, we need people on our committee. This was kind of a crazy night where Michelle she's observing the holiday, or she was going to until her husband got COVID, and I got sick, and it was scrambling to get somebody to come out and help us make this happen. Thank you, Henry, for doing that. We really appreciate it. But we need more people on the committee so that we're not just depending on a couple people to make this happen. So if you're thinking that you would like to join, we would love to have you. But other than that, we will see you in November and hopefully in person.
Thank you.
Get better, Lucy.
Thank you.
Get better.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, good night, everybody.
Night.
Thanks a lot, Henry. Thank you, Kathy.